He woke up before the alarm, like he always did. For a few seconds, he lay still and stared at the ceiling. The room was quiet except for the soft of the fan. In those early moments, when the world was still half asleep, he sometimes forgot that he was alone. His hand would move slightly across the bed out of habit, searching for someone who was no longer there. Then reality settled in. He turned off the alarm before it could ring and sat up slowly. There was no time to stay in his thoughts for long. In the next room, his 6-year-old daughter was still sleeping, curled up with her blanket twisted around her legs. She had school in 2 hours. Breakfast had to be made. Lunch had to be packed. Uniform ironed. Hair brushed. His day had already started. He moved quietly through the small apartment, starting the kettle and placing bread in the toaster. While the tea brewed, he stood by the kitchen window. The sky was still dark blue, with a thin line of light growing at the edge. He used to share this moment with someone else. Mornings used to have soft conversations, shared smiles, small jokes about who was more tired. Now, mornings were silent. He checked his phone quickly. No new messages, just work emails and reminders. His thumb hovered for a second over one particular chat thread. It was saved under an old number. The profile picture had been blank for years. The last reply from that side was from long ago. Still, he never deleted it. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and focused on the day. When he gently woke his daughter, she blinked up at him with sleepy eyes. 5 more minutes, she whispered, pulling the blanket over her head. He smiled. If you get 5 more minutes, I'll be late. And if I'm late, my boss will give me that serious look again. She peeked out. The scary one? He nodded dramatically. The very same. That made her giggle, and that giggle was enough to push away some of the heaviness inside him. He helped her get dressed, struggled a little while tying her shoelaces because she kept moving, and reminded her twice to finish her milk. He listened carefully as she talked about a drawing competition at school. He promised he would look at her artwork in the evening. Every word she spoke mattered to him. After dropping her at school, he drove straight to the office. The building was tall and modern, all glass and steel. Inside, everything was polished and organized. It was a place where emotions were kept hidden and performance was everything. He worked as a mid-level operations manager. Not too high, not too low. Reliable, consistent, quiet. He had been there for 5 years. People respected him because he did his job well and never caused trouble. But no one really knew him, especially not his boss. She was known for being strict, focused, and distant. Always dressed sharply. Always on time. She rarely smiled, and when she did, it never lasted long. Meetings with her were short and direct. No small talk. No personal questions. He admired her in a way. She was strong, confident, untouchable, but he never imagined having a personal conversation with her. Not even by accident. The workday moved quickly. Emails, reports, phone calls. He handled a client issue before lunch and fixed a scheduling mistake in the afternoon. He checked the clock often, calculating how much time he had before he needed to leave to pick up his daughter. At exactly 5 in the evening, he shut down his computer. No delays. No extra coffee breaks. His life outside the office mattered more than staying late to impress anyone. As he walked out of the building, he noticed his boss still inside her glass-walled office. She was standing near the window, looking down at the city below. For a moment, she looked less intimidating and more alone, but he quickly looked away. It wasn't his place to wonder. The evening passed in its usual rhythm. He picked up his daughter, stopped at a small grocery store, and helped her with homework at the kitchen table. She showed him her drawing, a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. "This is us," she said proudly. He looked at the picture carefully. There were 3 figures. His throat tightened slightly. "Who's the third one?" he asked gently. She shrugged, just in case. He forced a soft smile. "It's beautiful." After dinner, he cleaned up the dishes while she watched a cartoon in the living room. By 9 o'clock, she was asleep. He tucked the blanket around her and kissed her forehead. "You're my favorite person," he whispered. When he returned to the living room, the apartment felt larger than it really was. The silence pressed against the walls. This was the hardest part of his day. During busy hours, he didn't have time to think. But at night, when everything slowed down, memories came back clearly. The hospital room, the last conversation, the promises he made, the way her hand felt in his. He sat down on the couch and picked up his phone. Without fully thinking, he opened that old chat thread again. It had become a habit over the years. A strange comfort. He would type words he could no longer say out loud. Sometimes it was about their daughter. Sometimes it was about how tired he felt. Sometimes it was just one simple sentence. Tonight, his chest felt heavier than usual. He typed slowly. "I miss you." He stared at the message for a long time. His thumb hovered over the send button. He had done this before, sending words into a place where no one would read them. It didn't change anything, but it helped a little. Without checking properly, he pressed send. The message disappeared from the typing box and appeared in the chat, but something felt off. He frowned and looked closer at the screen. The contact name at the top wasn't the old save number. It was his boss. His heart dropped. For a second, he couldn't breathe. His mind tried to understand what had just happened. He must have opened the wrong chat. Maybe he had been distracted. Maybe his fingers moved automatically. But the message was there. "I miss you." Sent. Delivered. He sat frozen on the couch, staring at the screen as if it might disappear. His pulse grew louder in his ears. Why didn't he double-check? How could he be so careless? He quickly typed another message. "I'm so sorry. That was sent by mistake." He erased it. No, that looked worse. He typed again. "Please ignore the previous message." He erased that too. Every version sounded strange, suspicious, unprofessional. He locked his phone and placed it face down on the table, as if that would undo everything. Maybe she wouldn't see it tonight. Maybe she had her notifications turned off. Maybe his phone vibrated. He stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. One new message. From her. He swallowed hard and opened it. Just that. 3 dots and a question mark. His stomach twisted. She had seen it. He typed carefully this time. "I apologize. That message was not meant for you. It was a mistake." He pressed send before he could overthink it again. The typing indicator appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. He imagined her reading it in her quiet office, or maybe in her own apartment. What was she thinking? Was she angry? Confused? Did she think he was crossing a line? Finally, another message came. Who was it meant for? He stared at the words. That was not the response he expected. No anger, no warning, just a question. His fingers felt heavy over the keyboard. He could lie. He could say it was meant for a friend, or that it was a joke, something simple. But he was too tired to lie. "It was meant for my late wife," he typed. There was a long pause after that, so long that he thought maybe she had put the phone down. Then another message appeared. "I see." Nothing else. No judgment, no sympathy, just those 2 words. He didn't know why, but something about that response made his chest tighten in a different way. He locked his phone again and leaned back on the couch. The embarrassment was still there, burning under his skin. Tomorrow at work would be uncomfortable. He could already imagine avoiding eye contact, speaking only about reports and deadlines. He closed his eyes and ran a hand over his face. All he wanted was a quiet life, a stable job, a happy daughter. He never meant for his private sadness to enter his professional world. Yet, somehow, with 2 simple words, it had. And as he sat alone in the dim light of his living room, he had no idea that this small mistake, this accidental message, was about to change the careful balance of his life in ways he never expected. He arrived at the office the next morning with a knot in his stomach. The city streets were crowded as usual, and the noise of traffic felt louder than normal. He tried to act normal, but every step toward the building reminded him of the message he had sent. He had rehearsed excuses in his mind, but nothing seemed right. What could he possibly say if she asked more? He walked through the lobby, greeted the security guard, and took the elevator up. The office floor felt colder than usual. People moved about, typing at their desks, talking quietly in groups, but he couldn't focus on anything. His mind kept replaying the previous night. Who was it meant for? Had been the last words on his phone. He could still hear her tone, neutral, calm, almost unreadable, but somehow it cut deeper than any anger could have. He settled at his desk, opened his laptop, and tried to lose himself in emails, but the cursor blinked at him like a warning. Each ping of a new message made him jump slightly. He avoided checking his phone, even though he knew that sooner or later he would have to face it. A few hours passed. He managed to get some work done, though not without constant distraction from his racing thoughts. Then, a colleague leaned over his cubicle and whispered, "She's asking for you in her office." His heart jumped. It was too early for this. Did she know it was him? Was she angry? Did she want to fire him? He nodded silently and walked down the corridor. His palms were sweaty, and his steps fell heavier with each move toward her office. The office door was slightly ajar. He paused at the threshold. Taking a deep breath, she was standing by the window, her back to him. Sunlight filtered in, casting long shadows across the room. She didn't turn immediately. It was almost as if she was waiting, letting him stew in uncertainty. "Come in," she finally said without looking at him. He stepped inside, cautiously. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper. She gestured toward the chair opposite her desk, but he didn't sit. He couldn't. "You sent me a message last night," she said quietly, still staring out the window. He swallowed hard. I'm so sorry. That was not meant for you." His voice was low, almost trembling. It was a mistake. She turned to face him slowly. For the first time, he saw a flicker in her expression that wasn't her usual composed mask. Her eyes softened, though only slightly, and her lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Who were you trying to send it to?" she asked. He hesitated. His mind spun. He could lie. He could say it was a friend, a family member, anything. But something in her tone made him trust that she wasn't going to mock him or judge him harshly. He let out a quiet breath and said, "It was my wife. She passed away a few years ago. Sometimes I send messages to her." The words felt heavy as they left his mouth. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. He wanted the conversation to end, to escape the awkwardness, but he stayed, because this was a truth he had been carrying inside for years. There was silence, the kind of silence that isn't uncomfortable but carries weight. She didn't respond immediately. She just watched him, her hands folded lightly on her desk. "I see," she said finally, almost in a whisper. Her voice wasn't cold. It wasn't judgmental. It wasn't pitying either. It was neutral, but it carried a depth he couldn't name. He nodded, unsure if he should leave, unsure if he should say anything more. Then she did something unexpected. She stepped closer, her voice softer than it had been before. "Say it again," she whispered. He froze. His heart skipped a beat. He looked at her, confused. "I what?" "Say it again," she repeated, almost shyly. "Say what you just wrote." He felt a rush of embarrassment and fear. This was his boss. She had always been distant, unapproachable, untouchable. And now she was asking him to say something personal. Something raw. Something he hadn't meant to share with anyone in this world besides a memory of his late wife. He swallowed hard and whispered, almost to himself, "I miss you." Her eyes softened further, and she nodded barely, as if acknowledging something fragile and important. That small gesture made him feel a strange warmth. It wasn't about romance yet. It wasn't about crossing boundaries. It was about human connection, about being seen. For the rest of the morning, he tried to focus on work, but it was impossible to erase that moment from his mind. Every spreadsheet, every email, every report seemed trivial compared to the human moment they had just shared. He noticed her glances occasionally, not judgmental, not intrusive, just observant. It was different from how she usually behaved. Normally, she was all about tasks and deadlines, but now it felt like she was trying to understand him. The day moved on, but the air between them had shifted. The routine that had always defined a professional relationship felt different, more fragile, and more personal at the same time. He realized that this mistake, this accidental message, had opened a door that neither of them had expected. During lunch, he found himself replaying the conversation over and over. He remembered the softness in her voice, the small pause before she spoke, the quiet intensity of her gaze. It made him feel nervous, alive, and strangely comforted. After lunch, there was another task that required a meeting with her. He walked into her office, unsure if he would be treated the same. But she smiled slightly this time. A real smile, if only for a moment. "I'm not going to mention last night again," she said casually. "But I hope you understand that words matter, even mistakes." He nodded. "I do, and I thank you for understanding." She gave a small nod and returned to her papers. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No declarations. No confessions. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something personal had entered a professional space, and it had been met with kindness instead of anger. For the rest of the day, he found himself working with more focus, but also more awareness. He noticed how the small details mattered, how she organized her desk, how she answered emails, how she moved around the office. She was human. He had never thought of her that way before. When he left for the day, he walked past the building's lobby slowly. The city lights were turning on. People were hurrying home, talking on phones, carrying bags, living lives that seemed separate from his own. He felt tired, but not just physically. He felt the weight of the day, the weight of emotions he'd been holding for years. At home, his daughter ran to greet him. "Daddy, look what I drew," she exclaimed, holding up a new drawing. He smiled genuinely this time. "Wow, that's amazing." He played with her, helped her with homework, and made dinner. But even in these simple moments, his mind wandered back to the office, back to her words, back to the quiet intensity of that conversation. Before going to bed, he sat alone in the living room, phone in hand. He didn't text her again. He didn't need to, but he kept thinking about what she had said, about how she had asked him to repeat those words, about the connection that had formed in the most unexpected way. He realized that this mistake, this accidental message, was no longer just an embarrassing error. It was the beginning of something new, something he couldn't yet name, something that might slowly change his world. And as he turned off the lights and went to bed, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a mix of hope, nervous excitement, and the quiet certainty that life had a way of surprising him when he least expected it. He couldn't stop thinking about her words as the next few days passed. Every time he entered the office, a small tension ran through him, but it was mixed with something else. Curiosity, hope, and a strange sense of relief. It was as if the walls he had built around himself were starting to show cracks. And for the first time in years, he felt that maybe he didn't have to carry everything alone. The workday began like any other, with emails, calls, and the hum of keyboards. But he noticed her glances, small and subtle, as if she was trying to understand her without asking too much. He found himself watching her too, seeing the human side of a person he had always regarded as untouchable and distant. She moved with purpose, but there was something gentle in the way she interacted with her team. Brief smiles, soft encouragement, a light touch on a colleague's shoulder when the moment needed it. He realized he had never noticed these things before. By mid-morning, he received a message from her. It wasn't formal. No work-related tone. Just a simple, "Can we talk in my office for a few minutes?" His stomach tightened. He didn't know what to expect. Was she going to ask about the message again? Was she upset? Or was there something else entirely? When he walked into her office, she didn't look up immediately. She was leaning against the window, arms crossed loosely, staring out at the city below. The sunlight hit her hair, casting a soft glow around her, and for a moment, he felt like he was seeing her differently, not as his boss, but as a person who had her own life, her own struggles, her own quiet loneliness. "Sit down," she said softly, gesturing toward the chair opposite her desk. He sat, hands folded tightly on his lap, heart pounding. "I want to talk about last night," she began, her voice steady but gentler than he had ever heard it. "I want you to know I'm not angry. I'm not going to punish you for a mistake." He let out a small breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. "Thank you. I didn't mean to. It happens sometimes." His words stumbled over themselves. It was hard to explain something so personal, so private. She nodded. "I understand. And I think you need someone to listen, not to judge, not to criticize, just to listen." He blinked, unsure what to say. People rarely offered to just listen. Most tried to fix things, give advice, or look away. But she was offering presence, and it felt strange, comforting, and slightly terrifying at the same time. He told her about the nights when the apartment felt too quiet, when he sat alone after his daughter had gone to sleep. He told her about the hospital room, about the last moments he shared with his wife, about the way he had promised to take care of their daughter, no matter what. He didn't hold back. He didn't try to hide the ache in his chest. She listened. Not once did she interrupt. Not once did she glance at her phone or check the clock. She just watched him with eyes that seemed to hold understanding without pity. When he finished, he felt exposed, like a book had been opened and pages laid bare. He looked down at his hands, unsure what to expect next. Then she stepped closer, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Say it again." He froze. The same word she had asked him before. But now, it didn't feel like a mistake. It didn't feel like an accident. It felt intentional. "I miss you," he whispered, almost shyly. She nodded once. Barely perceptible, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. That small acknowledgement made his chest tighten in a way that was entirely new. It was not judgment. It was not pity. It was recognition. Over the next few days, their interactions became different. He noticed subtle changes in how she spoke to him, not in a professional way, but in a human way. Small gestures, softer tones, quiet acknowledgement of his efforts, and the careful balance he maintained between work and life. She began noticing his daughter's birthday on the company calendar, commenting gently when he left early to pick her up, asking if he had eaten lunch or taken a break. One afternoon, he was staying late to finish a report when she appeared at his desk with a cup of coffee. "You work too much," she said, handing it to him. He smiled, a little embarrassed. "It's nothing. Just trying to stay on top of things." She leaned against the desk, arms crossed lightly. "You always do. But don't forget that you're human too." The simplicity of her words struck him. For so long, people had treated him as someone who just had to endure, who had to be strong, who had to keep moving. She saw him as more than that. He found himself opening up in small ways, sharing stories about his daughter, joking about minor mishaps in his day, talking about books or movies he liked. And she listened. She didn't offer advice unless asked. She didn't make judgments. She simply listened, and the connection deepened. One evening, he stayed later than usual. The office was quiet. She was still at her desk, finishing some work. He stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker on. She walked over and stood next to him. "It's strange, isn't it?" she said softly. "How life changes in ways we never expect. One small mistake, one small message, and everything feels different." He nodded. "Yes, I never thought a simple message could mean so much." She smiled faintly. "It can. Words are powerful, especially when they come from the heart." They stood there for a while, side by side, watching the city below. No one spoke for a few minutes, but the silence was comfortable. It was a kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt full with understanding, with shared human experience, with a connection that had been unexpected but welcomed. As he left the office that night, he felt lighter, not entirely, not completely free of the past, but lighter in a way he hadn't felt in years. Something had shifted between them. Something unspoken had taken root. At home, his daughter ran into the apartment, excited to show him a drawing she had made at school. He smiled, genuinely this time, and lifted her up, asking questions about the picture. He laughed more freely than usual, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel weighed down by solitude. Later, after she had gone to bed, he sat on the couch, phone in hand. He wanted to send another message to her, something to acknowledge the day, but he didn't. He realized that some things didn't need to be said. Some things just needed to exist in the quiet moments, in the shared understanding, in the subtle gestures that didn't need words. The accidental message that had filled him with dread was no longer just a mistake. It had become the beginning of something that felt safe, real, and human. He didn't know what it would lead to. He didn't know if it would ever become more than quiet acknowledgement and subtle connection. But he knew one thing. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Not as a worker. Not as a single parent doing his best. Not as someone carrying grief in silence. Just as a person. A man who had loved, lost, and still found the courage to feel. And that realization made all the difference. It made the days brighter, the nights less lonely, and the routine of life, with all its chaos, responsibilities, and small joys, feel like something worth living fully again. He drifted off to sleep that night with a quiet hope in his heart, a hope that connection, honesty, and courage could change even the most ordinary of lives, that even a simple, accidental message could open a door to understanding, compassion, and perhaps, eventually, something more. It was the start of a journey neither of them expected, a journey of patience, of quiet human moments, and of the slow, gentle unfolding of trust and understanding that would shape the days to come. He noticed at first in small ways. She started asking about his daughter more often, not in a casual, passing way, but with real curiosity. One morning, as he walked past her office on the way to the break room, she called him in. "How is your little girl doing with her school project?" she asked. Her voice was soft, and her eyes were warm. He paused, caught off guard by the genuine interest. "She's doing well," he said, a small smile forming. "She stayed up late finishing a drawing. She wanted me to make sure it was perfect." "That's nice," she said quietly, nodding. "You're doing a good job with her. I can see that." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. For so long, he had been juggling work, life, and parenting alone. No one had ever acknowledged the effort it took to keep everything together. Hearing that recognition from someone he respected, someone he had always seen as untouchable, made his chest tighten with emotion. Over the next few days, their interactions became subtly different. She would occasionally walk past his desk just to hand him a document or coffee, without saying much, a small gesture that made his day lighter. During meetings, she started looking at him differently, not just as an employee, but as a person whose opinions mattered. He noticed, too, that she wasn't as distant with her team, giving them small moments of encouragement and attention, as if she was realizing that understanding people as individuals was as important as meeting deadlines. One afternoon, he stayed late to finish a client report. The office was quiet, almost empty. He heard the soft click of heels approaching and looked up to see her standing in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee. "You've been here a long time," she said softly, setting the cup on his desk. "Take a break. Even the best workers need to breathe." He smiled, slightly embarrassed. "Thank you. I just wanted to finish this before heading home." She leaned against the edge of his desk, her arms crossed loosely. "I know," she said, "but sometimes it's okay to take a moment for yourself. You can't care for anyone else if you're running on empty." Her words surprised him. She wasn't lecturing or scolding. She wasn't giving orders. She was just observing, understanding, and offering care in the quietest way possible. He realized that she, too, had likely spent years building walls around herself, hiding vulnerability behind professionalism and control. He nodded slowly, accepting the coffee. "I'll try," he said softly. For the first time, he noticed things about her he had never paid attention to. The way she adjusted her hair when thinking, the slight frown that appeared when she was focused, the gentle tone she used when speaking to her assistant. She was careful, composed, and strong, but human too. That evening, as he walked home, he reflected on how different the office felt now. It wasn't just about tasks and deadlines anymore. It was about human connection, about understanding each other as people with histories, burdens, and quiet victories. The next weekend, he took his daughter to the park. She ran ahead to the swings, laughing freely. He sat on a bench, watching her, and felt a rare sense of peace. Then his phone buzzed. It was her. "Hope you don't mind me texting." The message read, "How's your weekend going?" He smiled, a little nervous. He typed back, "No, I don't mind. We're at the park. She's being very energetic today." Her reply came quickly. "Good. It's nice to see her happy. You're lucky to have her." He stared at the message, his chest tightening. No one had ever said that to him before. Lucky. He was used to people seeing only the challenges, the struggles, the responsibilities he carried. She had acknowledged something positive, something real. Over the next few weeks, they continued exchanging small messages outside of work. Not flirtatious, not overly personal, just human. She asked how his daughter's school was going, how he managed to balance everything, and sometimes just send a quick, "thinking of you. Hope your day is going well." The accidental message that terrified him weeks ago was now slowly building a bridge between them. And while he was careful, aware of boundaries and professional environment, he couldn't deny that he looked forward to her messages. One day, she invited him to a brief meeting outside the office. They walked through the quiet streets, talking about work, about life, about how it felt to carry responsibilities that sometimes seemed overwhelming. He spoke about his fears of failing as a parent, the loneliness of single parenthood, and the quiet grief he still felt from losing his wife. She listened, truly listened, and when he finished, she said softly, "You've done more than you realize. You've kept going. You've loved, you've survived, and you're still here giving your daughter a full life. That's remarkable." Her words hit him in a way that surprised him. No one had ever said anything like that. They weren't empty compliments. They were recognition, validation, understanding. He felt seen in a way that went deeper than any professional praise ever could. Weeks turned into months. Their connection grew quietly, subtly, and without rush. At work, their professional relationship remained intact, but outside those walls, a tentative trust was forming. He shared small stories about his daughter, and she shared glimpses of her own life. Childhood memories, small regrets, tiny victories. They were learning to see each other as people, not just as roles. One evening, he was working late again. The office was empty except for a few cleaning staff. She appeared at his desk, not with documents or instructions, but with nothing at all. She leaned against the edge of his desk, arms crossed loosely. "You work too much," she said softly. "I know," he replied with a small smile. "You should take a break," she said. "Come out with me, just for a while. Fresh air." He hesitated. It was unusual for her to step outside the strict boundaries of work. But something in her tone was inviting, gentle, understanding. He nodded, and they walked outside together, leaving the building behind for a moment. The city evening was quiet, the streets less crowded. They walked side by side without rushing, talking about small things, books, movies, memories. He noticed how her eyes softened when she laughed, how her posture relaxed, how her voice became lighter. For him, it was a revelation. This was a side of her that no one else in the office ever saw. And he realized, too, that he would show his own sides, pieces of himself that he had hidden for years, pieces of vulnerability, of grief, of hope. When they returned to the office, she paused and looked at him. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said softly. "I just thought it would be good for both of us." He shook his head. "No, it was nice, really nice." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, and for a brief moment, the distance between them felt smaller, warmer, human. The accidental message that had started it all had grown into something neither of them had expected. A quiet understanding, a bridge of empathy, a connection based on honesty, patience, and small human gestures. He went home that night, his daughter running to greet him as always. But this time there was a lightness in his steps, a quiet confidence that maybe, just maybe, life had more to offer than he had dared to hope. And as he watched his daughter sleep that night, he realized that he was beginning to believe in possibilities again. Not rushing into anything, not forcing outcomes, but simply allowing life to unfold one small, meaningful moment at a time. Something had changed between them. Not dramatically, not in a way that needed declarations or confessions. Just slowly, quietly, gently, as people do when they allow themselves to be seen, to be human, and to trust again. And for the first time in years, he felt that hope wasn't a distant dream. It was real, present, tangible, something he could carry into each day, step by step, conversation by conversation, moment by moment. He didn't know what the future held, but for now, he knew he wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. He woke up to the usual sound of the city outside his window, but today felt different. There was a quiet anticipation in the air, a sense that something had shifted and might continue to shift in ways he hadn't expected. He got ready for the day, helping his daughter with breakfast and lunch, making sure she had everything she needed for school. Her laughter and chatter filled the apartment, and he felt a warmth in his chest that made the morning feel lighter than it had in months. At work, The air felt different too. She greeted him with the faintest smile as he entered, and it made his steps feel a little lighter. They exchanged quick words about reports and meetings, but there was an unspoken understanding between them now. He didn't feel the same tension, the same fear, or the same awkwardness that had lingered after the accidental message. They had built something quietly: trust, connection, acknowledgement. During the day, he worked diligently, but his mind wandered occasionally to the moments they had shared outside of work. The brief walks, the small talks, the shared laughter, and the quiet understanding. Each memory reminded him that life was more than deadlines, responsibilities, and routines. Life included moments of connection, moments where people could see each other fully without masks or pretense. Late in the afternoon, she called him into her office. He wasn't nervous this time. He felt calm, prepared to face whatever she wanted to discuss. When he entered, she was already standing by the window, looking down at the city. She turned as he approached and offered a soft smile. "I wanted to ask you something," she said, her voice gentle. "Would you mind if I met your daughter sometime? Just for a short visit. I'd like to see the person who has such a big place in your life." He blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected this. Part of him hesitated, worried about boundaries and what it might mean. But another part of him recognized the sincerity in her tone, the careful respect with which she asked. "She'd love that," he said finally, a smile breaking across his face. "She's been asking to meet people I talk about." A few days later, she visited. He watched as his daughter ran to greet her, her small arms stretched out. He felt his heart tighten with something new: relief, gratitude, and a deep sense of trust. The boss, usually distant and formal, knelt down to meet his daughter at eye level. She asked gentle questions, listened attentively, and even laughed at a small joke his daughter made. It was a simple afternoon, filled with small moments that would become lasting memories. He watched them interact, realizing how much he had needed someone who could understand the quiet responsibilities he carried, who could see him beyond the surface of work and parenthood. And he realized that he was beginning to feel something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Not the fleeting kind that disappears quickly, but the steady, quiet kind that grows with each shared moment of understanding and trust. Back at home that evening, after his daughter was asleep, he sat alone in the living room, reflecting on how far things had come. The accidental message that filled him with fear and embarrassment had transformed into a bridge. It had allowed them to see each other as human beings, to acknowledge grief, responsibility, and the small victories of daily life. He picked up his phone, but this time he didn't feel the urge to send a message immediately. He knew that words were powerful, but actions patience, and shared experiences were even more powerful. They had built something quietly, without pressure, without expectation, just understanding and connection. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened naturally. They found moments to talk outside of work, to share stories about life, family, and the challenges they faced. He learned about her past, her quiet sacrifices, and her moments of loneliness. She learned about his struggles, his triumphs, and his constant effort to give his daughter a happy life despite the loss he had endured. One evening, they walked together after a long day at the office. The streets were quiet, the air cool, and the city lights reflecting softly off the pavement. They didn't rush their steps. They spoke softly about books, movies, and memories from childhood. He noticed how relaxed she seemed, a side of her that few people ever saw. And he realized that he, too, was becoming more open, more willing to share the part of himself he had kept hidden for years. When they returned to the office building, she paused. "I'm glad we did this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It feels different, human, honest." He nodded, understanding completely. "Yes, it does. I've never felt this understood before." A silence followed, comfortable and full of meaning. It wasn't about romance or declarations. It was about recognition, connection, and the quiet acknowledgement of shared humanity. Days turned into weeks, and their interactions became a natural rhythm. They maintained professionalism at work, but allowed small moments of human connection to exist in between tasks and meetings. Sometimes it was a quick conversation about life. Sometimes a small gesture of care. Sometimes a shared laugh over something trivial. Each moment reinforced a bond that had begun with an accidental message, but had grown through patience, understanding, and mutual respect. He noticed changes in himself as well. He was less weighed down by grief, more open to hope, and more willing to allow small joys to enter his life. His daughter noticed it too, often commenting on how he seemed happier, lighter, and more relaxed. One afternoon, while helping his daughter with homework, he received a message from her. "Thinking of you. Hope your day is going well." He smiled softly, realizing that their connection had become steady, gentle, and reassuring. It didn't need drama or declarations to be real. It was simply there, present, consistent, human. That evening, after his daughter was asleep, he sat on the couch, reflecting on the journey that had begun with a single accidental message. He thought about how fear and embarrassment had been replaced by trust and understanding. How walls built over years of grief and solitude had slowly begun to crumble. How patience, kindness, and honesty had transformed a moment of mistake into the beginning of something meaningful. He picked up his phone again, not to send a message, but to simply acknowledge the thought. He typed nothing, put it down, and smiled softly. Some connections didn't need constant words. Some bonds were built through actions, shared moments, and quiet understanding. Over time, the subtle bond they had formed became stronger. He found himself thinking about her, not in terms of expectation or desire, but in terms of respect, admiration, and deep appreciation for the person she was. She thought about him similarly, noticing his quiet strength, his kindness, and the dedication he showed to his daughter and his work. One day, as he left the office, he looked back and saw her standing by the window, watching him go. Their eyes met, and for a moment, there was a silent acknowledgement of everything they had shared, of everything that had grown between them. It was a quiet, unspoken promise to continue valuing honesty, trust, and human connection above all else. At home, he tucked his daughter into bed, kissed her forehead, and sat quietly for a few minutes, reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. Life still carried its challenges, its grief, and its responsibilities, but it also carried moments of hope, understanding, and human connection that he had long thought impossible. He realized that life didn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. It didn't have to erase the past to offer hope for the future. Sometimes it was the small, gentle moments, the soft acknowledgement of pain, the quiet patience of someone who listens, the courage to allow oneself to be seen, that made all the difference. As he finally lay down to sleep, he felt a quiet contentment. Not happiness in its loudest form, not romance in its dramatic declarations, but something steadier and more enduring. Hope, connection, understanding, and the knowledge that he was no longer entirely alone in carrying the weight of his life, his grief, and his love. Tomorrow, he would wake up, help his daughter with her breakfast, head to work, and continue the rhythms of life. But he knew now that something had shifted forever, that the accidental message, the words spoken in fear and the moment of shared honesty had opened a door to a future where trust, care, and human connection could grow quietly, steadily, and powerfully. And for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe that love, gentle, patient, human love, was possible again. Not as a replacement for what he had lost, but as something new, unfolding slowly, naturally, and beautifully.